Welcome back to another episode of the She Overcomes podcast, where we sit down with trailblazers, changemakers, and visionaries who are shaping the future in their own unique ways. She Overcomes inspires, equips, and raises up women to become their boldest selves personally and professionally. Our mission is to empower existing leaders who live with courage and confidence in community. I'm Melanie Rudd, your host and founder of She Overcomes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to someone whose story is filled with bold moves, heartfelt leadership, and a true passion for creating environments where they can thrive. Calli Adamson Bakken, you're here.
I'm here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm so excited that you're here. All right, we're gonna share a little bit about who you are, and then we're gonna dig right in. So you are a dynamic nonprofit leader, a community builder, and an absolute champion for human-centered progress. And you started that 15 years ago, right? You stumbled into human resources, and now you're embracing your role as an industry disruptor. How cool are you? I was going to say, how cool is that? But then I was like, nope. Calli, you're cool.
You make me sound so much cooler than I think that I am.
I actually think, and this is like a total aside, a lot of times when people are like they're going to join us on the podcast, they're like, here's my bio. And I'm like, you're way cooler. Like you actually, like you just don't own it. And we're in the Midwest. And so we feel like to talk about our backgrounds is like proud.
Yeah.
And definitely, I think we lead with humility. We lead with, you know what I mean? Like that quiet strength. And you're like a pro. Right? So that's what I want to highlight about you today. So yes, so thank you so much for being here. You are cooler. You're cooler than you know. All right. So okay, tell us. Will you just tell us a little bit about that background, about those 15 years that you've gained and led, and have all of this experience, and then we'll talk more about what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a degree in psychology, expected that I was going to become either a therapist or a psychologist.
Actually, yeah, I can see both. Yeah.
And so I started working in the industry to figure out which direction I wanted to do before grad school.
Yeah.
I found out that as a bleeding heart, I probably would be pretty unhappy if I decided to continue in that realm because I cannot turn it off.
Yeah.
And so I weirdly fell into the office life that way.
Yeah.
So I came in as the first scheduling coordinator for a 24-hour behavioral health, mental health facility.
Yeah.
So at the ripe age of 21, I was managing 2,200 shifts a month.
Oh, my word.
Primarily staffed by college students. But I came in and said, this is what you need to do to make this work because it's not working right now.
Right.
And so I kind of led with that idea of we have a lot of things to do. We got to fix them. But I think I have a pretty good idea of how to do that.
Oh, my gosh.
And that was my gateway into human resources.
That was my gateway into it. I love that.
So I've really done pretty much everything within the human resources space.
Yeah.
But I started realizing pretty early that I was too disruptive for doing human resources in the upper Midwest. Mm-hmm. And I was about a year into what was supposed to be a 3-month implementation of a software system and went, I think HR tech is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so that day I started looking for jobs, found out there was an HR tech. Actually, they're just a couple blocks from here was where I used to work.
Yeah.
Found out there was HR tech being built right in Fargo. And within 2 weeks, I was putting in my notice and starting there.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what really got me excited was the idea of how we use technology and data to really better the employee experience.
Oh,
and so I joined forces with them, helped to launch a second spinoff company from there.
Cool.
And and then ended up really becoming more of a face for the company, talking about disruptive ideas, which led to me getting a license for my own Disrupt HR event.
Yes.
And so I've planned that. I've planned an HR story slam.
Yes.
Trying to figure out how to keep the energy and excitement going around positive disruption.
Yeah. I love everything. I love all of that. It's so good. And I think I have to just laugh. Like when I was 21, I was managing 21 syrups as a barista.
That sounds amazing. I love coffee.
It was actually awesome. It was the best job, not best job I've ever had, but I loved it. But that's amazing. And I love that. I mean, I think sometimes we go to school and like we're kind of taught, and then maybe students are different now, but I feel like when we were students, we were taught like, here, you pick a degree, you pick this thing, and then you do this thing. And then I grew up and I'm like, no, this is not linear at all. Like, and then I kind of felt like, am I broken? Did I break the work? You know what I mean? Like, did I break the process? Cause I did the thing that I went to school for, and I'm like, oh, I'm not really happy. I don't feel like that's a good fit. So I love that. And I love that you're a bleeding heart. You are a bleeding heart. But you know what? That's really beautiful about that one is that you love people really well. And I think that is a really unique, to lead with empathy and compassion is not natural for a lot of people. And so to be someone who can lead with empathy and compassion is such a valuable set of skill sets that I think you do it so naturally that it almost is like, is this cool? You know, like, I don't know. I just feel like that is like so much of who you are. And so it's really beautiful that you're tapping into that. So that said, talk about Disrupt HR, like talk about like your process with that. And that has really grown. I mean, I feel like that's a really big deal. Like, so like share kind of your process.
Yeah, well, figuring that out as I go, I guess. I had an invitation to be involved with another event and said, well, I've spent a lot of time in this area. Yeah, I need to figure out if that makes sense. And I found out that Minneapolis had a license that had been sitting open since COVID.
Wow.
And and like, how has someone not picked this up yet?
Right.
And so I got connected with an incredible moving woman down in that community who said, I didn't do it because of this, but I would love to help you do it because I think you're the right person.
Wow.
And so having that one person who said, I can help you secure sponsors, I can be your gateway into this community and the right people to speak and be at the event was what made it possible. So yes, I did a lot of work, but without that person getting involved at the right time, it never would have happened, especially not in the significant way that it has.
Right.
So Disrupt HR is, I would say, a light franchise model. Maybe consider it close to like a TEDx.
Yeah. That's kind of what, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And so there's about 185 events worldwide.
Wow.
A lot of them are cute little pop-ups.
Yep.
And that's great. That's really what it was intended for, was a local community, bringing people together, getting excited about change.
Yep.
And we're really kind of blowing that out of the water in Minneapolis as far as saying we need to get leaders mobilized.
Right.
And if we can't get leaders mobilized, then we can't make change happen. And we've just made a bunch of incredible people very frustrated. That was me on the HR side, was this is so clear. We've got to do better. Mm-hmm. This is how we create lasting employer brands, all of those things, which no one was talking about that when I was in a true HR seat 10 years ago.
Right.
And so that's been really, really fun to be able to go to an area where there are lots of people to tap into, lots of industries to tap into, and really start to get leaders excited and talking about this thing they had no idea existed, wanting to be involved, wanting to bring that back to their organizations.
Yeah. Tell me more about the human experience part of this. So can you, for those who maybe don't, or excuse me, the human experience, human-centered, right, is the words that you use. Can you tell me more about, like, can you define that for people who are like, oh, that's interesting, I don't know if I know exactly, just so we have a shared language?
Yeah, I think... careful of how I say some of these things.
But
when we talk about progress, a lot of times progress is despite human involvement.
Right? Yeah, because we are a bunch of not perfect people.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history around stepping on people to get to where we want to go.
Yeah.
And I am not about that. Nope. But I think human-centered progress, how do we keep employees, especially at the center of our company experience, because we spend so much money on employees. That's our most significant cost center. Yeah. And yet we assume that it's this revolving door of people willing to come through. Yeah. And especially now when employees are starting to open up and say, this is really not working for me. I think I want to do something else. Yeah. It's that much more important that employers lean in and say, how do we create a great employee experience, which ultimately creates a great company, both for investors, really, because it's a more profitable company,
Yeah.
but also for customers because you have such a better experience when you have an engaged and caring, compassionate person supporting your experience with that product or service.
Yes. So let's just say, for example, someone's listening right now and they're like, "Ooh, are there cliff notes?" I mean, listen, you guys, you have to actually just go to Disrupt HR. You actually, like you actually just have to support Calli and what she's doing. But are there like 3 bullet points? Like if you were to distill down some of that, what would you say how can we invest in people at a glance? Now I understand, like that's a really like
I
that's
can give
like
you one boiler point.
Tell me. Okay, I love it. Yeah.
If I were to pare it down for anyone,
Yeah.
how I say it is make people feel significant and they will surprise you.
Oh, that's the best. I actually kind of have to have like a minute to chew on that. I love that because I don't know if you know, but when we were relaunching and I was looking at where are women in the workplace, how are women engaging? How are they feeling? And I did all of this research, and I was like just nerding out on every Forbes article, every HBR. I was like, what's happening? And one of those articles talked about women not applying for jobs unless they were 90 to 100% qualified. And the thing that I struggled with is as I was distilling it down, because really distilling it down to like what's the one problem we're solving, I couldn't really take a look at it and say there's this one thing because they're all touching. All touching. And so to simplify that, number one was this fear, in my opinion, fear and insecurity. Like I think of those as the same thing. The number 2 thing that I was looking at was insignificance. And I hated using that word because I felt like nobody is like, hello, yes. It's like Fight Club. Like we talked about that, right? Like the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. We're not really talking about feeling insignificant. But then as I started to like peel back the layers and look back, it's like actually that's masqueraded by feeling shamed for who you are, lacking that sense of belonging, feeling powerless. Like no matter what I do here, no one's listening and it doesn't matter. So now I not mattering here is I'm now choosing to disengage and I don't really care what's happening with the business because no one sees me. No one's no one cares. And so it's so interesting that you say that word significant because I think it's a power-packed word.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you can use it into any aspect of the engagement process, right?
Yeah.
Make people feel significant with how you pay them. If you have pay disparity, which the gender pay gap has widened for the first time in 20 years this year.
I did not know that. Really? Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow.
And so that is, I mean, there's a lot wrapped up in that. We could have a whole
I know.
whole
There's
hour
too much. I know.
about that.
Just about that. Yeah.
But that's a huge example of not looking to, every job position can't pay 6 figures, right?
No.
There's that is not hard to refute.
Yeah.
But that's going to depend on the area where you live and a bunch of other factors.
Yeah.
And if you have something like women recognizing that they're not getting paid the same as their male counterparts, or I've given you 5 years and this new person came in and you're paying them just as much or more.
Sure.
All of that matters. Yeah. But you can then take that same lens to look at every other place that you engage with employees.
Yeah.
Training, I think, is another one. Human resources is really bad at just pushing everyone through the same process.
Yeah.
You don't even buy a product on Amazon being pushed through the same process as everyone else. Right. Yeah. Why do we think that we can successfully train people to mobilize our companies by putting them into this cookie cutter process?
Yeah. Wow. Oh, this is so good. I'm actually so mad I missed this HR this year. I'm like so angry with myself. Okay, so we could talk about that forever, but I actually really do want to talk about your new gig. I want to talk about Wiggle Work and why you started this. Like, I know it's consultancy, but like, I think you are going to blow up. And I want every single person to hear the problems that you solve, why you're engaging in the way that you are, and really what we can do to support you as you're like casting a vision for the future and seriously serving our community and hopefully communities across not just our region, but the nation in a way that is so meaningful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Yeah.
It actually started with Disrupt HR.
Yeah.
And so I did a presentation several years back. It was my first exposure to direct involvement.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talked about was on-site childcare and how it was the biggest missed opportunity for businesses, which I am also a data nerd just like you.
Yes,
We need the proof points.
Yeah.
Pie in the sky doesn't help anyone. We need to be able to actualize things.
Yeah.
And so I started digging into it and finding out that businesses are really the biggest place to be able to mobilize childcare in a way that we can't do in the private sector. And we know that the public is not able to, in the public sector, we're not able to move quickly enough to see the progress that we need right now to keep women in work.
Yeah.
So Wiggle Work is designed around answering the two big questions or the big stopping points that I've heard from employers as to why they're not doing it.
Yeah.
One, it's too big of a job and we don't know how to do it. So how are we supposed to solve such an important area of our employees' lives?
Right.
Two, employees don't want to leave existing positions, spots that they have for childcare.
Yeah.
And so if no one's going to come here, why would we do that? And so PR is something I get really excited about and how we really, create meaningful change in multiple places with the same information, right?
Yep.
If you're doing amazing things, you should be promoting that and attracting other people who are drawn to those things.
Right.
And so creating high quality childcare that not only supports employees, but you backfill with community seats is a huge PR opportunity and showing people that you care about people. They should come work here.
Right.
Lots of other things.
Yeah.
But it also is what you need to be doing with your employees to have them see that this is a better place than where they already are.
Right.
Or for a lot of people, they don't have anything to compare it to because they can't find a spot in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is me, just so we all know. I have a 2-year-old, beautiful. I mean, I have 3 children, but my youngest is 2. And we sat on lists for a very, very long. He's 2, and my mom and grandmas are still, like, he's at his grandparents' house today because I did even just recently receive notice from someone that I was on their list. And they said, we've actually just taken you off because we are only grandfathering families whose children already come here. And I was like, wow. And honestly, and I wildly respect this organization. I love them. And so but I was so like, that is a big problem. That is a big problem. And at this point, I'm like, he's 2, really, we have 3 more years. Can grandma and grandpa can we just wing it for a while? And I work independently. And so I can kind of adjust my life around his, but like as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I have a risk aversion that's very low. Like I'm like, okay, we'll just wing it. Whereas other people, most every other person is like, no, I need to know that I know that this is covered and our children are so, so important. So tell me more about like, what phase are you in? How can, people are listening and they're going to be like, oh, I wish my organization would do that. Like, how can people engage with you in a meaningful way to drive this forward? Because obviously it's a really big problem.
Yeah. So we've talked about bold moves.
Yes.
I left full-time employment a lot sooner than I planned on.
Yeah, same.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
It just needed to happen. And I think, and that's what that's what I needed in order to get me to take the risk because I'm learning that I'm a lot more comfortable with risk than I previously thought I was.
Yeah.
And so I would say I'm somewhere between pre-launch and first client right now.
Yeah.
So I'm taking some really cool certifications right now. I'll be the first person in the state of North Dakota to do this specific thing.
Wow.
I'll be the second person in the state of Minnesota to be able to do it. And so really focusing on what do I need to do to make sure that if I'm doing this, I'm doing it in a way that I know is improving the status quo.
Yep.
And so building that process, getting ready to be able to open centers while also looking for that first person that says, finally, we have the support we need to do it.
Right. So then in this phase and where you're at right now, who's the target market? Who like if let's just say this, we're at a networking event, who do you need an introduction to?
It's a great question. I think it's changing a little bit just because the dynamics of ages in the workplace are changing.
Yeah.
More grandparents are involved in these conversations and support, and maybe they want to stop supporting.
I mean, yeah.
But I think we have a change in hands of leadership happening right now.
Yeah.
That means that it's not necessarily the CEO sitting at the top of the organization that's going to be the most helpful for me to get in front of. So human resources is a natural conversation starter for me. I don't think that they're necessarily my buyer. But they're the right foot in the door potentially because they're connected to the employee experience and the business operations.
Right.
But really that head of operations, someone within the C-suite that recognizes we've got to do something pretty amazing in order to turn this around or in order to retain the people that we want to. With the most recent presentation I gave, I talked about the gap between participation in the workforce and between men and women. And 80% of that gap happens the first year after a child is born.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
And so trying to understand that women are more educated these days. They're very driven. You need to keep those women invested and engaged in the workforce if you want to be able to propel your organization forward. And solving childcare issues not only alleviate a lot of headaches on your end, but that also helps to keep those dynamic movers within the organization and not tapping out for something easier. Just staying home because that's what makes sense given the dynamics with childcare right now. Or them finding someone else who does a better job of supporting their ability to stay in the workforce, which a lot of times people are concerned people aren't coming back from maternity leave. Because you haven't instilled confidence that you can support them in that transition. So they're off looking for someone else who can.
Oh, it's so good. I'm so excited for you. I just I want to like hit the streets for you. I think you really inspire me. I'm like, you guys, we need to do this. Like, I want to hit the streets and be like, okay, here's who you need to talk to. Here's where we need to drive this forward. What do you, when you think of, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about some challenges in your journey and really how you've gotten here. But what do you think in 5 years this could look like? What's like the 5-year, like, here's what I envision. Here's the dream. If money's not an issue, if you are funded, if you are full funded and money's not a problem, where'd you go? What'd you do?
The physical dream is that I want my own headquarters with a play center, like outdoor playground in the middle in the lobby.
I love this.
So that is my physical goal that I'm aspiring to.
Okay, number one.
But to do that, obviously, I need a team that needs a place to be. And I think one of the things that's happened with other models that support businesses bringing childcare into the workplace is they have this desire to continue to hold control of it. And I think there's logical reasons for that, but I don't think that it's going to be as impactful if the organization does not take ownership of that process. And so wanting to be able to continue in a way that makes sense to help make sure that things are safe, that they're functional, but really primarily being able to provide the proof point that it's not the crazy out there company that's doing things first that should be supporting this, that this is really what our economy needs to continue to grow and develop. And so being able to build Wiggle Work into something that not only creates the development of new centers, but hopefully helps to be that launching point of other ways that we support our employees more effectively through policy, through practice, and also continuing to develop maybe a unique curriculum that does support that organization in such an effective way. There's a lot of people who are doing childcare that are out on their own little islands trying to figure it out. And how do we create a community both for those organizations that work with us, but for those independent childcare providers to really have the resources that they need to continue to improve quality of care, progress their own fitting within the industry, and continue to provide more and more opportunities for children to develop into their best selves.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I really love this so much. So shifting just a little bit, a little time. And actually, to everyone listening, you have your marching orders. Listen, we need to get this off the ground. So if whoever that is in some of these positions of leadership or that could have the conversation and drive that forward, like we'll definitely have Calli's contact information in the show notes. So like we really need to make this happen. So I'm just like, I couldn't be more excited and be your biggest cheerleader.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, duh. I mean, obviously it's like, we need this so bad. But you've had pretty remarkable moments in your journey. You talked about the 15 years. You've talked about what has brought you here. Can you even talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that you have faced? Like what has made you into this more bold person? You are in your bold era. You're stepping into these roles. Like what are some of those lessons learned? What are those challenges?
I stopped trying to fit in.
I love that. Number one. Okay. Bullet point one.
I don't think I ever did. And I was aware of that.
Yeah.
But I was trying to tread this line of pushing the buttons to create the progress I knew needed to happen while simultaneously recognize that I was always just on the edge of creating big problems for myself.
Yeah.
And so in retrospect, now that I've taken the step to do my own thing, I've filled my days more than I ever could have expected.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense that I would be an independent builder of progress.
Yeah.
But that's a really scary thing to do and embrace.
Yeah.
And as someone who does lead so heart-centered, I'm trying to get better at I'm not going to be everything to everyone.
No.
And I'm not always going to make friends.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for me because I just want everyone to feel good all the time. And if I'm not helping other people feel good, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I'm having to learn how to say no to people. And I hate that. And so like an example being, I have said I am not involved in selecting speakers from this point on for Minneapolis. Like I am happy to tell anyone all the tips and tricks of how to create their application.
Yep.
But I just want to get to be everyone's friend. And I know that I have the right people to help facilitate the content piece where I can remove myself from that because I know that building relationships with people, I have not always made the best choices or I've rooted for maybe the less perfect choice because of those relationships. And I've had other people saying, we can't do that. That doesn't make sense. And I've been so grateful for those people. And I recognize that I need to let them be those people. And if they're separated from having those conversations and getting people excited about it, that also helps them make the right choice without that connection piece too.
Yes. I feel like you and I are really similar in that, like, I'm a reckless yes giver. Like
same.
I am a reckless yes giver, and I've had to reel that in. Like similarly, I can't be trusted with some of those big yeses because I want everyone to feel included. I want everyone to feel like they belong, and like, I love that you said that, like, not fitting in. Like, I think you and I talked about that, like that fitting in is the opposite of belonging. And I think sometimes, and I don't know if it's just women, I think men do this too, is we retrofit. We mask in ways because we want so deeply for other people not to feel uncomfortable that we actually accidentally self-abandon. We accidentally give away yeses that should have been no's, and because we love people really well.
And we're trained to do that.
We are. A lot of, I think more women are trained to do that
100%
than men because I for whatever reason, because I think we're supposed to be nice. We're supposed to be accommodating. We have all of these expectations.
We put ourselves last.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then we baptize self-abandonment, and it becomes martyrdom, and it becomes very unhealthy. But we say we're quote, and here's the thing, I don't want to be offensive. See, I don't want to be offensive. I don't want to make anybody mad. But sometimes we're told, like, go low, be humble. We need to lead with humility, 100%. Sometimes people who have different skill sets, who lead with empathy, who lead with compassion, we're already doing that, and we're pouring from an empty cup. There's nothing left. And so actually for us, we're naturally kind of in that space. So actually we have to build up and say, I need to pull back a little bit, put someone else in charge of this, because I will do this to my own, I will do X, Y, or Z to my own detriment.
100%.
Yeah. And so it's really, it's tricky. It's like, yes, and also, but.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I think I don't have this figured out. And that's the
no.
biggest thing I want to come across to anyone is I'm working so hard at this.
Yeah.
Just like I hope everyone else is who hasn't already figured it out.
Right. Yeah.
But I needed to get to a really rough spot in order to finally say enough is enough. My husband said enough is enough.
Yeah.
And that's what gave me the courage to start figuring out that I needed to come up for air in a much more significant way than I was allowing.
Yeah. And we need that margin. And you and I have talked about that. Like the beauty of rest. It's so hard. It is so active rest is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I was just talking with someone last night about it. And because we've got big goals, big things we're trying to do. And I just said, we need the night off. We're not doing this. We're not going to drive. We're not going to drive hard right now. Actually, what's going to create a better environment for us to execute is a night off to rest and to pause and to think, what do I need right now? And then tomorrow we'll drive hard again. But like, how about we not work 13 hours today? That'd be super. And we're obsessed with hustle culture, and I understand all of that stuff. But like, I think I'm past that now, where I'm like, I can't self-abandon for the hustle anymore. And even if it's serving a lot of people, there's just one of me, and I have 3 children and now 1 grandchild. And if they don't have me, what's next? And so none of us, I don't know if any of us have it figured out. I asked somebody who's in her 60s, I'm like, when did you stop caring? Like, when did you, and she was served people for her whole life. And I was just like, when did you stop caring what people thought of you? When did you stop worrying that people were talking bad about you, or that they thought you were this or that, because she had been labeled, she's a driving woman, she's an executing woman. So she was labeled, aggressive when she was assertive, some of that stuff. Yeah. And she said, I think it was like in her 50s. Like, I think it was like in her 50s. She's like, I just couldn't give that any more energy. I was done, and I was like, I want to be that. I'm in my 40s, but, so, okay. I'm going to say, so Zelda Fitzgerald is someone who you have quoted that you absolutely love. Can you tell me, and it's The Perks of Being a Wallflower, right?
Oh,
Am I saying it right?
Well, I gave 2 quotes, so I kind of messed up.
No, you didn't mess up.
I bucked the system.
I'm actually super into that. I don't follow any rules, and I try so hard to. Just kidding. I don't really try so hard, but yeah. Tell me.
My dogs are named F. Scott and Zelda after F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda.
Okay.
And I just fell into that same trap, right?
Yeah.
And his wife Zelda. She's the original tortured feminist.
Really?
She's an artist. She's a writer.
Yeah. Yes.
She didn't write about some of the things that she wanted to because he hijacked them and used them first.
No way.
And she actually ended up institutionalized, but she was the original flapper. So all the stories about all of these people going off doing these things and the chaos that ensued. That's Zelda. That's what she did.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So she was the daughter of a judge.
Okay.
And rebelled and married this author.
Yeah.
And went all around the world. The ending is pretty tragic because she ended up, she was in a locked cell in an institution that then caught on fire. And so, I
actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So really, really interesting, sad ending. But the quote from her, which I hope that I gave enough preface to kind of understand, is, I don't want to live, I want to love first and live incidentally.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that idea of, I'm such an introverted person. If it's someone I probably love them, but if they say I love you, I'll be like, I love you too.
Yeah.
Like,
pull back.
Right. But I think loving through action is something that's really important to me. And we need people to be supported in significant ways just out by our communities.
Yeah.
And so that's been a real driving force with me within the nonprofit field, which I know we haven't really talked too much about.
Yeah, we will.
But also just in an approach to people in general of that place of non-judgment, of support, of we all just want the same things.
Yeah.
and we have different places that get us there.
Right.
That's sort of the idea, which also fits it well with the perks of being a wallflower quote, which I also included.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know
if we got it. I don't
isn't directly there.
Yeah.
So
the gist of it
is we are who we are for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And even if not all of them are good, we can still try to be okay with that. And we get the choice to figure out where to move from there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. There's a gal that I follow, and she says, love looks like something. And she's one, there's this phrase, stop for the one. She is someone that sees the one person hurting. And she's in the faith community. And so she talks about seeing someone who's highlighted to her by the Holy Spirit. And she's like, I need to stop for this one person. I don't know why, but there's a reason that I'm stopping. And so she talks about this idea of you stop for the one in front of you. And a lot of times, I think, especially in our culture, and I don't know if it's this generation, there's a lot of like, this generation does this and this generation does that. I don't know if it's that, but I think we're so busy that we forget the one in front of us. We forget to stop for that one. We're so excited about.
We don't see them.
No, we don't.
Because we're just we're on our phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so guilty of that. There's so many times I'm driving from one place to the other and I'm catching 25 minutes of a podcast instead of looking up. I'm constant. I'm like I'm a learner. And so if I could just podcast and read books all the time, that's what like my life goal is, to be that, whatever that is. But we don't notice. And so like what she suggests, and a number of people in this stream suggest, is stop for that one. And it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing. It can be, I'm at the grocery store, I'm looking around, the clerk looks sad. There's your cue. What can you do? What can you say in that moment? Like notice the name, call that person by their name, because we're lacking so much of this connection that if you can say like, oh, I'm going to build this platform and I want this many followers and we're going to do all of this stuff. Yeah, but you know what? That starts with one. And we have, not we, but like many people have become inundated with like the big platform, the big stage. They want to be the speaker. They want to do the thing, but they're actually unwilling to stop for the one. And you can be a really compassionate speaker. You can have your platform. You can do all of that. But if you can't treat the clerk with kindness in front of you, that's not a lasting legacy. That's a selfish platform building legacy. And I think sometimes that's hard, Anyway, so I love that. Sorry, I'm like now I'm going to step down for my my platform. Calli, you're so affirmative. You're like, yeah. So tell us about the nonprofit world. So you had mentioned that, and I want to talk about that before. Before we wrap today.
So I stepped away from nonprofit work to do startup work, which I saw a lot of similarities.
They're like the same thing. Where none of us are profiting.
Right. Well, and
just kidding. I shouldn't say that, but you know what I mean.
Well, I think the drivers are really different.
They are. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was the piece that I really missed on the startup side. And so I'd always planned to get back to nonprofit work. And I've always been a volunteer.
Yeah.
What do you need? Let me do it.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
And so I had a friend who got me involved with the board of a nonprofit I never had heard of in my own community. And I looked him up and was like, how do I not know that this exists?
Our community's best kept secret.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I became a board member of an organization called Matthew's Voice Project.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've been hanging out with them for 3 years, trying to help drive the mission forward. I declined a couple of requests to become an executive director for them.
Yeah.
And with some of the transitions that happened and wanting to move forward with Wiggle Work, I, as of July 1st, am the interim executive director for that organization. But we partner with the schools. There's this really cool federal legislation called the McKinney-Vento Act that's been in place since the 80s. They rewrote it in 2015. But basically, it provides an infrastructure for schools to support homelessness within the school system more effectively.
Okay.
It's not perfect.
Well, nothing is. You're doing it, but you're doing something, right? This is the one in front of you.
Yeah. 100%. And what's really cool about our community specifically is this is an extra added on thing on top of an already way too busy group of people. And so we're really blessed in our community that all 3 of our school systems have gone through this process to receive these federal funds to have this infrastructure.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Matthew's Voice Project, through students who qualify for McKinney-Vento related services, we support their educational journey in lots of strange ways to do the things that keep them in school, getting that degree so that they have the best opportunity to break the cycle of poverty.
Yeah. Wow. So is there a story behind Matthew?
It's from the book of Matthew.
Oh, it's from the book of Matthew.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Let
I
the
love
little
that.
let the children come on to me, I believe is the quote of where the name came from.
Oh, I had no idea. I love that. So tell us more about that. You and I were talking a little bit more, and again, I didn't really know about it, and only from you. But this is a very practical way to love and serve our community and the children in it. Can you tell us some of those just very practical things that Matthew's Voice is doing to serve these children?
Yeah, so we often serve as a bridge between some incredible resources, whether it's mental health services, housing services. We're that go-between to make sure they don't fall in the cracks.
Yes.
And so one of the cool things we got to do last week is a student who had been kicked out of her home.
Yeah.
She'd fallen behind on paying for braces, which she was paying for independently. She works full-time on top of going to school. She's doubling up in an apartment building that she's not on the lease, which is problematic, of course.
Yeah.
But she had other things that she needed to pay for.
Yeah.
And so she'd fallen behind on braces. We were able to step in, get her back up to date on that, so that she could focus on education.
Yeah.
It's amazing hearing some of the stories where, we do a holiday drive and they have the opportunity to say a want, a wish, and a need.
Yeah.
And some of
love
those
that.
things, are I need a pillow.
Wow.
Shampoo. And, there was a boy last year who, I don't know, I think he was 8 or 9, and he was asking for size 3T underwear and socks because he wanted to make sure his little sister was taken care of.
Wow.
And so I think it's an incredibly humbling moment to see how the kids respond to that. We primarily focus on unaccompanied youth, so they don't have a parent or guardian in the picture. But we step in often in addition when there's not another resource that can support, and those poor social workers are going, I don't know how I'm going to get this kid to school if we don't solve this problem.
Wow.
So first and foremost, those unaccompanied students in our community, we have one labeled unaccompanied as young as 9.
No.
But primarily they are in that 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 12th range that you'd, I don't want to say expect, because no one should expect any of this. But we have in our little metro 1,000 students plus that were identified last school year, and we're at about 30 to 50% higher identification depending on the individual school already. So one of the schools, they identified more students the first week of school starting this year than they'd identified that entire first month of school last year.
Why is that? What's going on? What is that?
The economy.
Really?
That's a huge part of it. I'm hoping that part of it is kids more willing to come forward because they're seeing the support that their friends or whoever is getting. So I think we're doing a better job of wrapping around students.
Okay.
But I think the need is just really great right now. I think there's a lot of people worried about buying holiday gifts for their family just because everything is so much more expensive. I read a really interesting path to homelessness story where someone had been in their house that they'd rented for 15 years. The landlord decided they wanted to sell that property. And with how much rent has increased in the last 2 years, income-wise, they weren't able to get into another apartment. So they weren't behind on payments. There was nothing that
They didn't do
way.
anything wrong.
They just didn't have the means to be able to get to that next step. And so now this family of 4 is living in a hotel because that's all they can figure out right now.
Wow. I don't, again, I didn't really realize this was a thing. And I don't know if you know this, but when I have shared a little bit about it, but my mom was 14, 16, and 18 when she had me and my 2 older sisters. And so I remember very distinctly one year a volunteer Santa came to our house and gave us donated gifts and donated you know what I mean? The whole thing. And my mom, she's such an amazing person, and she has overcome so much. And I look back at that, and I remember her saying, like, they gave us too much. There's other kids that we know in this place. And so she asked us to take the things we loved the most and to separate them into two piles. And the stuff that wasn't the thing we wanted, we rewrapped, and we ended up giving to another family that we knew in need. And, my sisters and I later, we were in this small community, and really involved in like student senate. What's that called? Like council. I can't remember whatever the high school thing is. And one of my sisters, she was given, not identified, but like, this family has this age daughter, this age person. And so she was tasked, she was like the president or whatever of like the student senate. She was tasked, her and another girlfriend were tasked with like, okay, this is our budget. We're going to buy these gifts for these kids. And then at Christmas time, she opened the gifts that she picked out. And we didn't know, I don't think I understood the level of poverty we were living in. And I didn't until many years later. I didn't even know, because there's a lot of hard stuff. And I was so loved, I think, that I didn't, imperfectly, or my parents, you know what I mean? Like, just whatever. But like, I look back at those times, having Christmas gifts under our tree, having no idea. And so like, as a child who's been the recipient of that kind of generosity, I can tell you it means the world to me. And I didn't even know. I didn't even really realize like how fortunate we were that other people were generous so that we could really celebrate Christmas, or we could have the things in front of us. And so like, I love that work, because I'm a child who received that. I was the one that other people stopped for, which is probably why I'm passionate about what, like I hope to be doing today. But thank you so much, like, for that work. And I'm so grateful that exists here. And so, how can people get connected to that? How can they support? Like, you guys are going to need a location. I mean, what's happening? Because now we have a whole community of people who need to be delivering gifts and things so they can support this work.
Yeah. So our list for this upcoming holiday season will be published on November 20th.
Okay.
We supported 523 students last year. And so I assume that number will be even higher.
A lot more. Yeah.
So being able to select a family to purchase for, I mean, it's eye-opening, right?
Yeah.
I talked about that, to see what these students select and what they put down. And I think it gets challenging for people too, where it's like, okay, this child is homeless, but they put XYZ down. Like, how do they think people can do this?
Yeah.
And I think when we're so far removed from what the world looks like from someone else, we don't understand the pieces that contribute to that. So an example being, we've had people get really mad about PlayStations or Xboxes put on. Like, okay, well, that child might be living in a hotel.
Yeah, with nothing to
do. And that is their one way to be able to dissociate from whatever is happening around them.
Yeah.
And so really trying to help on other people to understand more the importance of giving without expectation.
Right. Yeah.
And how do we show up and love someone unconditionally without worrying about how we would have done something different ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
So now I'm getting off on a soapbox a little bit.
No.
But we'll have that holiday drive coming up. Of course, money is always helpful.
Yeah.
And we can provide great donations, especially or receipts and, all that fun stuff for partners. But the biggest two things that I'm working on in this interim role is to really create a funding stream that allows for us to have a full-time executive director in place.
Yeah.
And also to secure our own space. We have an incredibly generous business that gives us basement space for all of our clothing and donations and everything that then get distributed to the schools. But we have limitations in when we can access that space. And so being able to get in at 5:00 on a Friday when we have a social worker saying, I have a student who's in flip-flops and it's January. We need to be able to respond to that quickly. And so far that means going out to Target or Walmart or whatever, which is fine, but that's not the most strategic way to
Right.
use our funds
Yeah.
when that needs to happen. And so looking for a community partner that says, hey, I've got extra space I know I'm not going to be using for the next 3 years.
Right.
Let's get you in.
Yeah.
Or how do we get the funding stream to then pay for a space if
Right.
it's not possible to have one donated?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, that's so good. Again, we have our marching orders. So, and we'll put all of that in the show notes and just the way that we can connect to you. So as we wrap, I've got a couple rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Perfect.
All right. What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day? Do you do that actually? Now it's
yeah.
like, this is a confession.
That is. I'm not helping with the rapid fire piece of it. I have an amazing 4.5-year-old. And so just getting to be in his presence and how he responds to the world is probably the best way to re-anchor into what's significant, what matters right now.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Okay. What's one book you think everyone should read?
I love Nudge.
Real? I've never heard of it. Okay.
Richard Thaler.
Yeah.
He won a Nobel Peace Prize in economics he's basically considered the father of behavioral economics.
Wow.
And so the book of Nudge is about how do we create the default option being the one that's better for people.
Yeah.
And so making, the better option, the path of least resistance, rather than requiring people to opt in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really interesting way to think about how we set up systems.
Yeah.
Because so often that action is required in order to have that thing happen. So let's just make that the thing we want to be happening.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay. What's your quirky talent or skill that you have that most people don't know about?
But I guess more people in the human resources space know about it than I'd expect, but I play the banjo.
No, really? You're so cool. Okay.
I have some very fancy destination instruments that I don't deserve, but maybe someday I will.
Okay. And then our last one. What's your go-to motivational song?
I am a downer. I love like all the depressing, moody. Yeah. I think if I have to pick one that's uppity, do you remember a Goofy movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
That Eye to Eye song?
Yeah.
Like if I'm falling asleep in the car, that is the song that goes on. So a Goofy movie, Eye to Eye.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Okay. That's amazing. So now for any woman stepping into her bold era, what do you have? What's your last piece of advice you can give that woman?
Stop trusting everyone else's opinion of you before your own. I'm learning that now.
Yeah, that's really good.
Your gut instinct is so much stronger than you give it credit for.
Yeah. That's all right. We're landing the plane on that one. Okay, so now, but I do want you to tell us, where can we go to connect to you for wiggle work? Where can our listeners go to follow you on socials? Tell us all the ways to connect. And then, of course, with Matthew's Voice.
Yeah. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me.
Yes.
Weirdly
okay.
enough. I haven't actually officially launched Wiggle Work yet on LinkedIn.
Yes. Okay.
Because I want my website ready first.
Yeah.
So that's a great place to be able to find me, or just Calli at wigglework.co.
Yes.
Otherwise, I mean, just out and about, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. And then what about Matthew's Voice?
Yeah. So you can
Is
find
there a
me.
website?
We do have a website,
Okay,
MatthewsVoiceProject.com,
Gotcha.
not .org. You can find me at info@Matthew's Voice Project or executive director at MatthewsVoiceProject.com, or LinkedIn is a great place to find me for that too.
Oh my gosh, Calli, thank you so much for being here today. You are amazing. I just am so, so grateful that you were able to make it.
I am so grateful for the opportunity to hang out with you. Thank you.
Oh, yes, of course. All right, Overcomer, if you've enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe for more episodes where we can feature leaders like Calli who are making a huge impact in our community. We want to see all women walk in their authority and power as bold leaders in each sphere of influence they belong to. Remember, you are stronger than you think you are. Until next time, stay inspired and lead with courage and confidence in your community.